I pulled up 2 years of trading data and measured every trade I had taken within 30 minutes of a loss. The number I found explained 3 blown accounts in 2 sentences, and when I finally found it, it had nothing to do with anything I had spent years trying to fix. It was a 30-minute window, that specific window that opens the moment a loss closes. That window I had never measured, never tracked, never even thought to look at. And when I finally looked at what was happening inside it, the numbers were so stark that I sat staring at them for a long time, unable to fully accept what they were telling me. What I found in that data explained everything. 3 blown accounts, 14 months of work destroyed in 11 days. Every period of my trading life where things had fallen apart inexplicably and suddenly. All of it lived inside that window. The account that finally broke me had taken 14 months to build, ground up from a small starting balance through genuine sustained improvement. By the time it reached the balance it represented the most disciplined period of trading I had ever produced. I was proud of it in a way I had never been proud of a trading account before. Gone in 11 days. I sat staring at the final balance for a long time after it happened, because I could not explain it. The strategy had not changed. The market had not done anything extraordinary. There had been no single catastrophic moment I could point to, as the place everything fell apart. Just 11 days of slow, consistent bleeding that I had watched happen in real time and been completely unable to stop. It was not like I had blacked out and woken up to a ruined account. I had been fully conscious and completely unable to intervene in my own destruction. Like watching yourself make a mistake in slow motion and being powerless to stop your own hand. I went back through every trade from those 11 days looking for the pattern, and what the data showed me was something I had never considered looking for in 2 years of journaling and reviewing and trying to understand why my trading kept breaking down at the worst moments. Sorted every trade from those 11 days into 2 categories. Trades taken more than 30 minutes after the previous loss, and trades taken within 30 minutes of the previous loss. The first category had a win rate of 61%. Consistent with my historical performance, the strategy working exactly as it was supposed to. The second category had a win rate of 23%. Same strategy, same setups, same market. The only difference was the amount of time that had passed since the last loss. 14 months of building, gone in 11 days. And the entire destruction had happened inside 30-minute windows I had not known to protect. I sat with that number for a long time, 23%. Because it was not just a statistic, it was a confession. It meant that across 2 years of trading, every time I had entered a position within 30 minutes of a loss, I had been operating at less than a quarter of my actual capability without ever knowing it. The trades had felt like my trades. The decisions had felt like my decisions. The confidence had felt real. But the results were telling a completely different story. And that gap between how it felt and what it was producing was the most unsettling thing I had encountered in 2 years of trying to understand why I kept losing money. But that discovery only raised a bigger question, one I did not have the answer to yet. And the answer, when I finally found it, was the last thing I expected. The trader who eventually explained it to me had been consistently profitable for 7 years. Then he had gone through almost exactly what I had gone through, built something real over a long period, watched it unravel in a way that had no logical explanation, gone looking for answers in the wrong places for months before finding the answer in the one place he had never thought to look. He had been trading well for most of a year when the unraveling started. His strategy was sound, his risk management was disciplined. His results across the previous 8 months had been the most consistent of his trading life. Then one morning, he took a loss and immediately entered another position. That trade lost. He entered again. That trade lost. By the time he stepped back and assessed the damage, he had turned one manageable loss into a morning that took 2 weeks to recover from. He went back through his records that evening, and he found the same pattern I would later find in my own account. Every significant drawdown in his trading history had the same fingerprint. A normal loss, followed by a cluster of trades taken in the immediate aftermath that bore no resemblance in quality to the trades he took when his mind was clear. The losses themselves had never been the problem. What he did in the minutes after them had been destroying him the entire time. He explained what was actually happening inside the brain when a loss registers, and this is the part that changed how I understood everything that had ever gone wrong in my trading. The moment a loss closes your brain does not process it as information. It processes it as a threat. Something has been taken, and every ancient system your brain has for recovering from threat activates simultaneously. Before you have even fully registered what the number on the screen means, your brain is already in recovery mode. And recovery mode is incompatible with good trading. The calm, analytical part of your mind that evaluates setups with patience and follows rules under pressure gets progressively overridden by something older and faster and completely indifferent to your trading plan. And the terrifying part is that it feels like confidence. The revenge trade does not feel like a revenge trade when you are inside it. The setup looks valid. The logic sounds reasonable. You could explain the trade to someone sitting next to you, and it would sound like a perfectly rational decision made by a disciplined trader operating at full capacity. But the win rate is 23% every time, regardless of how reasonable it feels. Because the judgment generating that confidence has been compromised in a way that the compromised judgment cannot detect. It does not know it is compromised. That is what makes it so dangerous. He described a specific day that made everything hit differently. He had taken a clean loss one morning, well-managed, normal, the kind of loss that should have been filed and forgotten. He waited 12 minutes and entered a new position. That trade lost. He waited 8 more minutes and entered again. That trade lost. By the time the natural 30-minute window had closed, he had turned one manageable loss into 4 losses that took 3 days of solid trading to recover from. 4 losses from 1. Not because his strategy broke down, not because the market became unreadable, because he sat at an open platform with a compromised brain and gave it permission to keep making decisions. And here is what made that day the one that finally changed everything for him. He had journaled every single one of those trades in real time. He had written down his reasoning for each entry. He had documented his confidence level. He had noted the setup quality. When he read those journal entries the following morning, with a clear mind, the reasoning was sound. The setups were described accurately. The confidence was genuine. There was no obvious evidence anywhere in the writing that the person making those decisions was operating at 23%. The compromised version had been completely convincing, even to itself. He went back through his data that evening and found something that stopped him completely. The pattern had been there for over a year, buried inside his records the entire time. Every significant drawdown he had ever experienced traced back to the same sequence. A loss followed by trades taken inside a window where his judgment was not what he believed it was. He had been unknowingly sabotaging himself for over a year. He made the rule 30 minutes that evening and made it absolute. No exceptions, no special circumstances, no setup so clean they justified breaking it. 30 minutes. Every time. Regardless of what the market was doing or how clear the next trade looked. 4 years later, he had not broken it once. And what happened next was something neither of us had anticipated when he first told me about the rule. I started interviewing other traders who had implemented it. Traders at different levels, different strategies, different markets. And what I found across every single one of them was a pattern so consistent, it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like a law. Every trader who implemented the 30-minute rule reported the same unexpected side effect. Their entries got better before any loss ever occurred, not after, before. Because when you know a loss costs you 30 minutes of trading time, something shifts in how carefully you evaluate every position. You become more selective, more patient, more willing to pass on setups that are almost right. The cost of being wrong is no longer just the money, it is the time. And that additional cost filters your decisions in a way that no checklist or criteria review ever fully replicated. One trader described it like this. He said, before the rule, every trade was a standalone decision. After the rule, every trade carried the weight of what a loss would cost him beyond the money. And that weight made him look at setups differently, more honestly, with less willingness to rationalize. He said his criteria did not change, but his honesty about whether his setups met them completely changed. And that honesty compounded over hundreds of trades into results that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with the quality of decisions being made before any loss had even occurred. Oh, when I implemented the rule properly, what changed first was not my win rate on trades after losses. It was the quality of the trades I was taking before any loss had occurred. More selective, more patient, more willing to sit through sessions where nothing clean presented itself. more willing to close the platform with nothing taken rather than manufacture a reason to be in the market. By the end of 60 days, my overall win rate had improved by 11 percentage points. The strategy had not changed. The market had not become more favorable. I had not refined my criteria or improved my entries. I had just stopped bleeding inside a window I had not known to protect. And something else had shifted in those 60 days that I had not expected at all. I stopped fearing losses, not because they stopped mattering, even because I had a protocol for them. The moment a loss closed, the next step was automatic. Platform closed, timer set, room left. The decision had already been made by a version of me that was not compromised, and following that decision required nothing from the version of me that was. The loss landed differently when I knew exactly what came next. It was no longer an emergency to be solved. It was a signal that the protocol activated, a trigger for a predetermined response that the clear version of me had already designed for the compromised version of me to follow. And a loss that activates a protocol is a completely different psychological experience from a loss that leaves you sitting at an open platform with a brain that is about to make decisions at 23%. The fear that used to attach itself to every open trade had lost most of its power, because what followed the loss was no longer uncertain. It was decided. It was automatic. There was nothing left to fear about it, and a trader who does not fear losses executes completely differently from a trader who does. Every trade I was taking clearly, without the weight of what a loss might trigger, without the background anxiety that had been running underneath every position for 2 years, without me ever identifying it as the thing quietly degrading every decision I made. There was one more thing I discovered that I want to tell you about before we finish, because this is the piece most traders never get to. And it is the piece that separates the traders who implement this rule and see temporary improvement from the traders who implement it and never look back. The 30-minute rule only works if you genuinely believe the version of you inside that window cannot be trusted. Not intellectually, not theoretically, genuinely, in the way you feel when you look at that timer and every part of you wants to open the platform because you can see a setup forming and you are certain this one is different. The traders who break the rule break it because they have not fully accepted what the data showed them. They know the statistic. They believe it applies to other traders. But in the moment when the market is moving and the setup is there and the confidence feels real, they believe they are the exception. They are not the exception. Nobody is the exception. The rule exists precisely because in that moment, you will always feel like the exception. That feeling is the compromised judgment doing what it was designed to do. And the only defense against it is a rule so absolute that the feeling is irrelevant. You do not evaluate whether this situation is different. You close the platform, you set the timer, you leave the room, and you come back in 30 minutes to find out whether the setup was still there, whether it was still valid, whether the version of you with a clear mind agrees with the version of you that was certain 30 minutes ago. Most of the time, those two versions disagree. That disagreement is the entire lesson. 3 blown accounts. 14 months of work destroyed in 11 days. All of it traced back to the same place, not to the losses, to the 30 minutes after them, to the version of me that took over in that window and made decisions that felt completely justified and were statistically almost certain to make everything worse. The loss was never the problem. What followed the loss was where everything got decided, and it still is. For every trader sitting at a screen right now watching a red trade close and feeling that familiar pull toward the next position. That pull is not instinct. It is not discipline. It is not professionalism. It is a 23% win rate dressed up as confidence. Close the platform, set the timer, leave the room, come back in 30 minutes as the version of yourself that actually knows how to trade. That version has been there the whole time. You just keep letting the other one go first. I've put the best trading psychology books ever written in the description below, free, because understanding what happens to your judgment after a loss is more valuable than any entry strategy you will ever learn. If you made it here, you already think differently than most traders. Subscribe if you want content that cuts through the noise.